What is the majority of the homeless population, in your opinion, that is lazy or drug addicts?
Is that a multiple choice question?
No.
I didn't understand the question.
In
Sorry.
your opinion, how do you think the stereotypes were created of lazy and drug addicts for the homeless population?
Oh, that was the original question that you asked me too? Or is that a different question?
She changed the wording.
I changed
Okay, yeah, I definitely didn't understand the first time. So how are those stereotypes created?
Yeah.
And I would say that it's because most people have never been experienced a situation where they would be so destitute, or not have family to reach out to or people to help them. So it's an experience that they're unfamiliar with, so they just assume those things. And then that creates a lot of stereotypes. Does that make sense, or do you want me to talk further?
Okay. Oh, it's in all caps now. Okay. Do other students recognize homeless behavior?
No, I don't think they necessarily do. So there are homeless students in every district. There's not as many homeless students here as what I'm used to. But typically, the definition for homeless is different for schools. Have you guys already learned this? So the definition is different. So we have families who their homes burn down, right? And they're rebuilding that, so they have to live with somebody else. So under the state's law, those people are considered homeless in the school system. So any family living with another family. So in a big city, when you might have multiple families in a household, they're all considered homeless. So there's kind of a school definition of homeless, and then I think a public definition of homeless. But typically kids won't recognize it as much unless, maybe they're wearing the same clothes every day, or if they see the homelessness, if it's visible on the streets or in a car, that sort of thing. But I don't think they do normally.
Okay. And what could peers do to help homelessness?
I think awareness, empathy, understanding that different people end up homeless for different reasons. And instead of blaming someone, I think trying to understand that they're just in a situation you've never experienced.
Okay. What social pressures do homeless students face?
Some of the most obvious pressures are things like fitting in, trend-wise, so material things. There's nobody really trendy in here. Just kidding. But name brand clothes, things like that. Cleanliness, which is, some kids make fun of kids for that, and a lot of times it's due to homelessness or lack of access to water, that sort of thing. But I think the fitting in and the social piece would be the most challenging one for a homeless student.
How do you help homeless kids feel normal at school?
Well, I try to remove the barriers as much as possible. So we have here, even before, when I first started work, there are people in town who would bring items and donate them. So there would be backpacks of supplies in my office, PE clothes, sometimes clothes, food, things like that people just donate from the community, which is really good. So if there are students that I'm aware of, I will try to give them those things confidentially. So it's not embarrassing for them, but to say, hey, somebody dropped this off, you don't want it, you can bring it back and I'll give it to somebody else, right? So I try to do it like that and not make a big scene out of it. Some kids are really open and talk about it too. So it's really different and dependent upon the kid, but those are the things I try. The other things we do in the school setting is homeless students get free lunch. They don't always know that, and you have to explain to them how to go through lunch lines. We'll often get new students, especially in bigger districts, who will come in and they'll be displaced there because they're homeless. And so you have to kind of, if you're new, you already don't know how to do anything, and then you don't know how to get lunch, and then you get free lunch and you don't know how to do that. So you have to kind of teach them regular procedures that would you guys would already know. We also buy their PE clothes, all of those sort of things, so they don't have to worry about as many barriers as we can. A lot of districts have backpack food programs, usually more in elementary. So on Fridays when kids go home, public schooling, if you're in a high poverty area, so I worked in Decatur and it was about 85% poverty, which means about 85% of the kids are on free lunch. So in schools like that, they will have backpack programs where on Fridays, the kids will get a backpack of food to take home for the weekend because during the week they're eating 2 meals at school. And even if you're not a free lunch kid, everybody's lunch is free in Decatur. It's a state rule once you're over a certain percent. So they would get 2 meals a day during school, and maybe we'll give them a snack at the end of the day because they're probably going home and not eating. But on Fridays, they'll take a backpack of food for the weekend. Does that make sense?
Do homeless children get bullied at school for being homeless?
They do. It depends on the district. I haven't honestly seen it here, but I think besides Taz, our kids have really good character and manners here. I'm just kidding, but so I don't really see that very much here, and I don't know how aware kids are of which kids are homeless here. But in a school district like Decatur, there were probably 400 to 500 homeless kids at a time. But I had 9,000 kids, so in perspective, it's not as much as it sounds like. But we went to uniforms, for example, because kids would get bullied for their clothes. You know, Jordans, things like that are very important, right? I don't even know name brands because I'm not that cool, but whatever you guys wear. So we went to school uniforms so that kids didn't stand out, right? If you didn't have nice clothes. Everybody has a blue polo if you're at MacArthur and khakis. And then we supplied them for homeless students. So you didn't have to worry about it as much once we went to uniforms because it wasn't as noticeable. But I think it also makes you forget, over the years, I realized I started forgetting who was poor and needed help, right? Or needed food or need assistance because all kids start to look the same. Before I could tell kids that needed additional help, right? Just by looking at them. But not once you went to uniform. So there are benefits, but also some drawbacks. And I haven't really seen kids here get bullied yet. But, you know, maybe so. You guys probably know better than I do.
How do, like, children living in poverty, do they, like, make a profit to support their family also?
I categorize people into the working poor. So there are a lot of people who work, but they're still poor. So they work, but maybe they don't have a good enough job or a degree that will help them make enough money that even though they're working, they're still living below the poverty line, right? So maybe they can't, their power's getting shut off a lot or their phone or whatever it is. There are a lot of people who are poor who work. And people don't believe that a lot of times. They think, oh, they just don't do anything. They need to work harder. But there are also some people, I think it's a smaller percentage, who don't work and they try to abuse the system, right? And so they just try to get resources and try to get, public aid or whatever it is. And then we stereotype them and think that's how all poor people are. But most people that I've encountered in my experience, they do work, and sometimes they work multiple jobs. They just work jobs that are part-time and don't have benefits, or they don't make enough money that they can't raise their family. Oh, no, I'm talking cheese in my mouth. Go ahead.
So, Miss Bonner was telling us about your childhood and stuff. And
Okay.
I was wondering if, like, you got a good education, because obviously you need a diploma to be a superintendent, like, or a principal.
Yeah. So I don't know how much she told you guys. I really don't know how much she knows, but that's kind of creepy. So I was one of 5 children. This is going to be more information than you guys want. How long is it? Can I keep you guys?
Go for it.
Okay, go for it and skip your classes. All right. Yes. So I was one of 5 children. That's true. And raised by a single mom. So my parents were married when I was young, but my dad had a lot of drug problems. He was very abusive, things like that. So they got divorced when I was in 4th grade, I think. And I have a sister who's a year younger than me that has cerebral palsy. And so she can walk, but you would know there's something wrong. Her speech is very altered. Her movement's very altered. She can't tie her shoes, like fine motor skills. But once you get to know her, you can understand her. She uses profanity. It's clear as day. I can understand those words. But other words is a little more challenging. So my mom and dad were both high school dropouts. And my mom went back and got her GED after they got divorced. So school, even though we lived in a very poor home, she worked the entire time, but she had 5 kids to raise. So it wasn't, like it's enough to feed them maybe. But school was always very important to her. So she had to drop out of school when she was 13 in Kentucky. So she had dropped out at a very early age. Her dad was a tobacco farmer. So school, because she didn't get to go, was really important. So we always had to get good grades. We always had to do homework before we'd go outside. There were all these rules all the time that I thought, kind of sucked at the time, but later I was like, it's probably a good thing she did that, or we would have been, running wild. So school was very important. So I was the first person to go to college in our family. And my mom has 8 brothers and sisters, and then my dad has 7. And they all live in Kentucky, except for my mom and her twin sister who live here. So I was the first one to go to college and knew nothing about college. But my mom always said, you have to go to college, because I got good grades. I graduated at the top of my class. So I didn't even visit a college. I just applied at Eastern because that's where my teachers went. But my mom didn't know anything about taking me to college. So I just showed up there the first day of school, and I was like, okay, this is where I live. And just had to figure it out on my own. But I don't think that's the experience all kids in poverty have. Usually if your parents don't know anything, that sounded terrible, don't know the benefits of college, they won't really push it, right? Because they don't know. They've never been to a college. They are living just fine, however they live. And so usually that's generational and it just repeats itself. So I think my situation's unique in that school was very important to my mom and to my teachers. And although she didn't, take me to college or know what the campus looked like, she made me go. So it worked out well. I got a degree in accounting and econ first. So I worked in accounting, and then I started substitute teaching when I was having my kids. And really enjoyed it. So that's when I got my teaching degree, and then my principal degree, and then my superintendent degree. So I kind of went to school all along. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Did I even answer the question? Okay. I started talking, forgot what I was talking about.
What exactly do people experience in poverty?
People in general is, I think, a lack of access would be the big thing. So things that are very normal to you and I, going out to dinner with our families, that doesn't happen as much, right? Because you're not going to have that extra cash. A lot of hungry children. I'm going to focus mostly on kids in poverty in the school system, and if you want to know about others, I can. But you will have kids in high poverty districts that come to school and can't focus because they're really, really hungry, right? That's why most of the schools in Decatur have breakfast in the classroom. So kids don't go to the cafeteria, but in their classroom, there are, like, your food service comes around and serves, they have a hot breakfast in every classroom because kids can't really focus if they're hungry and then they're upset. Oftentimes, lack of access, like I was talking about, to water. So maybe not as many showers, things like that for personal hygiene as you need. Medical support. So maybe not going to the doctor as much as they should. Not going to the dentist. I mean, there are kids that haven't been to the dentist until they get into high school, and the high schools require a dental exam when you're living in poverty because their parents have never gone to a dentist. They've never had insurance. So those are the things that come to mind that I haven't already talked about.
I'm just going to ask one because you kind of answered the other two that I had. How do you think people who aren't homeless view people who are?
People who are or are not?
Are not homeless view people who are.
Generally, our society likes to blame people for their situation. And it's probably divided. I think there's a large chunk that blame because they don't understand it. So, you think, well, they should go to work, or they should go to some government program, or they should do this. So generally, I think people blame homelessness. But there's also, I think, a growing group of people who empathize and are trying to understand how people end up in that situation, because it's different for everyone. Sometimes you will have, remind me to come back to a tour for you guys. Sometimes you will have moms who are in an abusive situation and they will take their kids and leave. So they end up homeless living in a car, right? But if you don't know that and don't talk to the kids and family about it, you'll be like, she needs to get it together. Well, she might be running from an abusive spouse. So I think there's a good growing population that's trying to understand it, but the majority of people blame or try to ignore because it makes you uncomfortable. I'm going to detour too. I took my kids to Los Angeles when they were probably 10 and 8. And we stayed at the Westin, which is a very nice hotel on a main strip, but probably a half a block from our hotel was kind of an overpass, like a highway overpass, and there might be 50 homeless people just sleeping out underneath this bridge, right? And so my kids were like freaking out. They're like, we do not want to walk by there. Like, they did not want to go. I'm like, they're not going to do it. So we had to talk to them a lot about homelessness at an early age, but it's that natural tendency to, you don't understand it, it makes you uncomfortable, so you just blame it and try to ignore it as much as you can instead of trying to understand it. On the tour, because I'll go to that now before I forget, and I don't know how we would ever make this happen, but Decatur offers a tour through United Way. That might be a project in one of your classes you could look at sometimes. And so